The Air Pro 3 from Earfun look, on paper, like the perfect set of earbuds for 2023. It's just unfortunate for Earfun that we listen to music with our ears and not on paper. The Air Pro 3 are the world's first LE Audio ANC wireless earbuds supporting the LC3 codec. LE Audio will eventually replace Bluetooth Classic, and LC3 is a much more efficient, scalable replacement for SBC. Unfortunately, it's unlikely that your device will support it, as not many phones do at this stage. But the Air Pro 3 are packed full of other features. They're using a single 11mm wool composite driver. They're Bluetooth 5.3 enabled with support for the Apt-X-Adaptive codec. Their Quietsmart 2 technology brings up to 43 dB hybrid active noise cancellation, and they're moisture resistant up to IPX5. There's support for the Earfun app, which we'll be taking you through a little bit later. Trust me, you're going to need it. And the battery life is very impressive as well, giving you up to 45 hours of playback with the case. This product received a lot of hype, especially from the influencer type YouTube reviewers. So I decided to buy a pair out of my own pocket and see how they performed in real life. This review hasn't been vetted by Earfun. The product wasn't sent to me by Earfun. It's all my own views. I picked them up from Amazon UK for $55.99, but their MSRP is $69.99. So you're likely to find the price around the €70/$80 mark. And when you're paying that kind of money, you're expecting a decent unboxing. The unboxing here is functional over stylish. The packaging is similar to what you get with Soundcore's mid-range buds. And once inside, you definitely get a feel that Earfun are maturing their branding and making the unboxing experience that bit more professional. The manual and warranty card are held inside a small yellow envelope. Open that up and you'll find another little surprise in there as well. Yep, Earfun have included a cleaning stick, essentially a cotton Q-tip to wipe the earwax off the buds after you use them. Practically speaking, it's pretty useless because nobody's going to keep a waxy stick lying around, but it does serve as a useful reminder to treat your earbuds with the appropriate care and attention. The manual is in a few different languages, including English, Chinese, German, Spanish and Polish, and it uses diagrams and well-translated text to good effect. The spare tips and charge cable are housed in a small yellow box, and the ear tips are a little bit different to the usual soft, cheap silicone ear tips you get with budget earbuds. They're soft but quite thick and springy, and that's important to the ergonomic design, which you'll see as we move to that section in the review a little later. The charge cable is your bog standard USB A to C, don't get too excited about that. And now we move on to the charge case. Earfun have allowed for wireless charging with this model, which was nice to see. They also support quick charge in wired mode, so 10 minutes worth of juice will give you 2 hours extra playtime. For me, that is a massively convenient feature that I always like to see, and perhaps don't see it often enough with buds at this price range. It takes around 2 hours to charge the case in full on wired mode and about 3.5 on wireless, and it will give you an additional 4 charges. The USB-C charge socket is at the back of a compact and slightly generic looking case which measures 6 by 5 by 3.5 centimeters. And when you open the case for the first time, make sure you peel off all of the stickers, otherwise you may find that the buds don't charge properly. Once you've sorted all that out, you'll find that the charge case configuration is similar to that of the Edifier NeoBuds Pro and SoundPEATS Live, with the battery connectors on the inside of the stems of the buds, necessitating that they're placed with the tip facing down slightly at an angle. The buds do feature Hall switch mode, so you can start the pairing and connection process as soon as you flip the case open. There are 3 LEDs on the outside of the case to denote charge level. When the case isn't plugged in or on a wireless charging pad, when you open the case you'll get all 3 LEDs lit when the battery level is over 60%, 2 if it's over 20% and 1 if it's over 10%. That 1 will flash if it's under 10%. You've also got a reset and pairing button in the center. The case is portable and it's quite sturdy as well. There's an element of friction applied to the hinge on the lid, and that does enhance the potential longevity. Now onto the design and ergonomics. The Air Pro 3 are stem based in earbud, coloured in grey with the Earfun branding located at the base of the stem. The circle at the top is a touch control area and it's nicely designed. Often earbuds can be a little sensitive and not always intuitive in this area. Once you get to know where you have to touch to initiate a control, it works really well. The length of the stem is quite average, it's 32mm, very similar to its peers, but the shoulder area which leads to the nozzle is quite thick and as a result they can feel a little bit angular in your ears. And that angular frame means they wear bigger than you would expect, and by relying on gravity to kind of hold the tip in your ear, they don't feel especially secure, especially during workouts. And that is quite a strange phenomena that saw me adjusting the buds quite a bit, especially, as I say, during workouts, but also when I was making and taking phone calls and talking a lot. Even though they were perfectly secure, I often felt like they were on the verge of falling out. But overall, the build quality and ergonomics are pretty good, and they do feel a cut above your typical sort of $50 earbud in that respect. Buds are IPX5 water resistant, so they're absolutely fine for workouts and a splash of rain. Just don't go submerging yourself with them. Overall, the build quality feels pretty good, and it's a nice touch that Earfun have slightly beveled the battery connectors on the stem so that when they're in your ears, they're just tucked away a little bit from your skin. If you have a nickel allergy, then it's going to reduce the chance that you're going to get a rash as a result of wearing them. But ANC on the Air Pro 3 is one of the headline features, and it actually stands up pretty well. Whilst you've got some limitations, you've only got 3 modes: ANC on, off and transparency. Earfun have combined good passive noise isolation with very powerful performance on low frequencies, and whilst it isn't quite as good on your mid-range and higher frequencies, it's certainly very respectable for the price. I tested them out in the usual noisy outdoor and indoor environments, and in your busy coffee shop it nullifies the voices that you've got going on from those indistinct chats around you. They also excel at dealing with extractor fans and air conditioning units. For those with an MSRP under the $100 mark, there's not too many that can compete with it. It's about the same as the Capsule 3 Pro from SoundPEATS, provided you've got good fit. With the Earfun probably just about shading it across all frequencies. Obviously if you pay a little bit more, you've got the likes of the Oppo Enco X2 and the Soundcore Liberty 3 Pro, which are a little bit more powerful, but they cost a bit more, so certainly for the price I think you're getting a pretty good return. Now if you push the Air Pro 3 into your ears a little bit deeper, you'll be able to hear quite a bit of white noise in the background. It's not something that particularly bothered me, but I know if you've got particularly sensitive ears, then this is something that may be a problem to you. Transparency mode is very good. It's very natural sounding. It's lacking the hiss that you hear over your own voice on models where the transparency mode isn't quite tuned as well. So that's a standout feature, and it does perform very well. Certainly nearby conversations, you'll be able to hear them without too many problems. Where the conversation is a little bit further away, that's where you might struggle a bit to be able to discern every word, but nonetheless, again, it's punching above its weight at this price. You can control active noise cancellation either through the app on the main screen or toggling through the different modes by holding down the left earbud for a couple of seconds. You can also customize in the app which modes you want it to toggle through. So if you just want transparency mode and ANC on, you don't want to mess around with ANC off, you can remove that in the app, and then you won't have to endure that when you're toggling through the modes next time around. So now onto the audio, and having read and heard that Earfun had released various firmware patches to try and change the sound signature a little bit due to the overwhelming amount of bass, I was really surprised to hear that it doesn't seem to have changed a great deal. I tested with firmware versions 0.4.1 and 0.4.7, and there was no discernible change in the frequency response. And I also had quite a sizable disparity in amplitude between the left and the right buds, so it wasn't a particularly great start when I conducted the testing. I remember seeing a GameSky review a couple of years ago on the Quietsmart Apollo Air, where he talked a lot about the features and what they look like on paper, but unfortunately the sound signature didn't come up to par, and I feel like it's exactly the same thing with the Earfun Air Pro 3. In fact, I went back and dug out the frequency response chart for the Apollo Air because I felt they sounded very similar, and as you can see on the graph here, there's a lot of similarities, certainly in the areas where they fall a little bit short. In fact, I'd probably go as far as saying that the Apollo Air sound better out of the box. The sub bass and mid bass on the Air Pro 3 are particularly bad. Without EQing, it just sounds like one big unrefined mess. I listened to and have tested with a wide variety of different music styles, but in particular I'm a big fan of the Anjuna sound, so house and melodic techno, and that relies on a clean and fast kick drum and a tight and accurate bass response. And I felt like EQing was just a thankless task to try and get the Air Pro 3 to reproduce this music style in a faithful way. On 80s rock, which tends to be very mid-range centric, where you've got male vocals, you've got different types of guitars and synths, out of the box it is extremely difficult to even hear all of those orchestral elements, let alone place them. The lower mid-range, even in comparison to the Quietsmart here, is quite uncontrolled, and it can leave tracks sounding quite boxy. Dip at around 3k blunts the beat of the drum, and this in turn gives the percussion a real unnatural feel. The trebles are also quite disappointing. In the mid trebles, some instruments can feel a little coarse, and you've got a dip at 7k and a peak at 8k. That can leave some vocals sounding too far back from the rest of the arrangement, but it can add sibilance to other types of vocal. These sharp peaks and dips make EQing the Air Pro 3 quite difficult in terms of consistency across various different music genres, to the point I kind of gave up with it in the end. The soundstage is pretty narrow and it can leave tracks feeling congested and even a little bit blurred. The resolution isn't great either. Things do sound quite a bit better when you switch ANC off, but having that great ANC kind of takes the point out of it if you have to keep switching it off to listen to music. Thankfully, you do have lots of control within the EQ of the Earfun app, and it gives you the capability to save different presets according to whether ANC is on or off. You've got some limitations over the EQ. It is mostly centered around the lower frequencies, although that is the area of disappointment here, so that's a gift and a curse in a way, in that you don't quite have as much control over the trebles. So I recommend turning to wavelet, where you've got the ability to use a parametric EQ rather than a graphic equalizer, and that gives you a little bit more control, which you're going to need if you want to eke out any kind of audio quality out of the Air Pro 3. The Air Pro 3 used a single 11mm wool composite driver, and sadly it falls some way short of the capabilities of modern dual driver releases such as the Soundcore Liberty 3 Pro and Edifier NeoBuds Pro. It's miles short of what you would expect on something like the OnePlus Buds Pro 2, Huawei FreeBuds Pro 2 or Oppo Enco X2. And to be honest with you, it struggles even against single driver budget releases like the SoundPEATS Capsule 3 Pro and even the QCY HT05 Mellow Buds. Here's the measurement against the Soundcore, which is a very bass rich dual driver earbud, and as you can see there's quite a bit of fat by comparison in the Air Pro 3, all the way from the sub bass through to the lower mid range. You've got a difference of around 5 dB at 200 Hz. That's definitely going to contribute to the muddiness that you've got in those lower frequencies on the Air Pro 3. And by gradually boosting between 7 and 900 Hz, that brings out the bassline without cluttering up the low end too much. This is kind of the opposite to what Earfun have done with the Air Pro 3, and as a result you're just getting that overwhelming unnatural bass sound. The Soundcore always feels like it has a little bit more brilliance and a little bit more air, and you can see that from how the higher frequencies are tuned. You know, it doesn't really matter what Earfun are doing here with these frequencies because the bass is just so overwhelming, and even when you do try and reduce it on the EQ, I find that it loses that kind of natural orchestral tone. And here it is against the SoundPEATS Capsule 3 Pro. As I mentioned previously, a similarly priced earbud, but SoundPEATS just typically box clever in terms of the constraints of a single driver setup. To be fair, SoundPEATS have had a lot of practice at getting their house sound right, and I think you've seen that with some of their recent releases where the sound is much more mature. They understand that they can't go in with these big boomy bass lines because a single driver doesn't really facilitate that, especially when you add the compression of using a Bluetooth codec. With both the Mini Pro HS and the Capsule 3 Pro, they've realized that just cutting out the mud at 200 Hz has a massive impact on how natural and how smooth the bass sounds. The trebles are tuned quite similar, although you don't have that nasty peak at around 8K, and as a result I don't think you'll ever hear vocals sounding sibilant with the SoundPEATS. Now I could carry on doing comparisons with pretty much all of the TWS which I've mentioned in this review so far that sound better than the Air Pro 3, but it's not a particularly constructive exercise. Earfun have had a go at trying to improve the tuning through different firmware releases, and it doesn't seem to have done any good. I've no doubts that you can probably get these buds sounding okay if you spend a lot of time on the EQ, but for me, I just don't want to be bothering with all that. I prefer something that just works out of the box, where a vendor understands the constraints of their drivers and of the compression algorithms that they're using, and just produces something that sounds good out of the box. And you've got two examples there, as well as many others like the QCY that I mentioned, that you can pick up for less than $30, and they sound better than this out of the box. For me, the sound is the real big letdown here, and there are simply better options in a similar price category that I personally would favour. The Air Pro 3 are pretty good on calls, especially outdoors. The CVC8 noise reduction algorithm seems to be particularly aggressive indoors, where your voice can sometimes get lost in that noise reduction. Now for some samples in 3 different scenarios so you can hear for yourself.
Okay, so we are testing the Earfun Air Pro 3 for call quality in an indoor environment where there's absolute silence in the scene. What we're trying to replicate here is what you or your caller can expect to hear when you're perhaps working from home and you've managed to get everyone out of the house and you've closed all the windows and there's no sound going on in the scene, and you're making or taking an important call or doing a presentation or an interview, something like that. What we're looking for here is the tone and the weight in your voice, and to hear if it's a true representation, or at least as close as possible, and there's not excess digitization or compression being applied. So this time around we're testing the Earfun Air Pro 3 in a busy coffee shop. So if you've got to make or take a call in a busy coffee shop, or a busy classroom, or an office, something like that, this is how you can expect your voice to sound at the other end of the line. What we're looking for here is how good they are at being able to distinguish your voice from those many indistinct, distant conversations which we've got going on around you. The Air Pro 3 from Earfun are definitely moving out of that budget category into that sort of mid to upper tier in terms of the price. I think they're retailing around the sort of 60 to 80 euros, pounds, dollars mark. They're packed with a bunch of features, but I'm not that impressed with them so far from my initial test. Although I'm interested to hear how the microphone performs on this model.
In terms of other features and connectivity, the Air Pro 3 are capable of a number of different codecs. You've got the Qualcomm native codecs that comes with having the QCC3071 Qualcomm chipset. So Apt-X and Apt-X-Adaptive are probably the 2 choices which you're going to turn to the most. As you mentioned in the intro, they are capable of LC3 and LE audio, but I tested these on the Sony Xperia 1 IV, which unfortunately didn't allow me to select LC3, so I was stuck with Apt-X-Adaptive, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. It is a very efficient codec and you're getting pretty good latency even without using gaming mode. The buds are Bluetooth 5.3 capable. I didn't have any major connectivity issues other than the odd bud dropping out here and there, but that's pretty common when I'm out and about and it's in a congested area. That tends to happen with most earbud models, so nothing to worry about there. They are capable of multi-point connectivity as well, and this seemed reasonably reliable, although in the app you don't have a device list, so you're kind of relying on knowing which devices it's connected to at that time. The Earfun app is pretty good. It's not in the league of something like the Soundcore app, but it does give you quite a bit of control. The main screen layout is quite intuitive. You can toggle active noise cancellation here, you can toggle gaming mode, and you've also got a shortcut through to the equalizer and customizing your controls. Now I mentioned the equalizer earlier, and there is one massive drawback with this. It doesn't save your EQ settings to the bud, it only saves it to the app. So if you set your EQ on your phone, for example, and you want to use that same EQ setting on your tablet, you'll need to install the Earfun app, and also you'll need to do the EQ all over again. Now, it may be possible if you sign up for an account with Earfun that you can possibly use EQ across multiple devices when it's stored into your account, I've read through Earfun's privacy policy and how they were using your personal data. It just wasn't something I was prepared to sign up for, so unfortunately this wasn't something I could test. But the ability to fully customize controls for single, double, triple tap and long press on both L and or R is a really useful feature. And that's kind of about it for the app. It's quite basic, but the layout is good and it's very easy to find everything that you're able to tailor within it. Battery life on the Air Pro 3 is great, and you've got that fantastically useful quick charge feature where you can get an extra 2 hours worth of playback from just 10 minutes worth of juice. The case can be charged wired or wireless as we mentioned previously, and it just takes a little bit longer to charge the case fully when you're using a wireless charger. I think it's about 2 hours on wired and around 3.5 hours in total on wireless. For that, you're getting 4 additional recharges on top of the advertised 9 hours, although for me it was more like between 7 and 7.5. Although as I mentioned previously, I didn't get the benefit of being able to use the LC3 codec, and I think that's what the 9-hour statistic is based on. Even so, getting more than 5 to 6 hours worth of playback with ANC on, I think is a pretty decent return. It's kind of my minimum level of expectations with an earbud, which the Air Pro 3 meets comfortably. Another nice feature is the automatic shutdown, so if you haven't got anything playing for more than say 10 minutes, I think it is 10 minutes, then they will automatically shut down. This is particularly useful if you're sleeping with your earbuds in, although the shape of the Air Pro 3 certainly doesn't lend itself to side sleepers. So to summarize, despite a lot of fanfare about the Air Pro 3, unfortunately, because the audio is so poor on them and they're going to take so much EQing, I found that it just simply wasn't worth it, and you're probably better off going for other mid-range models. The Air Pro 3 has a fantastic feature list on paper, including support for really future audio technologies in Bluetooth, such as LC3 and LE audio, but I feel like there's much more to come from vendors over the next few months that can not only handle these tasks just as well, because let's face it, Earfun are ahead of the game here with these features. A lot of devices don't even support them, and hopefully you won't have the issue of the really disappointing sound to contend with. Now, even if you don't mind spending hours with the long arduous task of EQing to get the sound right, the resolution isn't fantastic either. So as I said previously, there's simply better options available. I was really surprised that this model has been received so positively on YouTube, but I do feel that when you're paying for the buds, it is a very different experience, and perhaps you articulate your views in a slightly different way to if you've been given the product for free and that you're required to do a review within a certain amount of time. Maybe there's a little bit of subconscious bias that goes into that, or maybe I'm completely wrong. I don't know. I welcome your comments in the comments section below. Thanks again for watching. It's ReganCipher signing off.